Welcome to the Hero version 4 training webinar part 1 of 2. Today I'll be giving you an overview of Hero version 4, our NatHERS accredited Home release, and all the other features contained in version 4. Firstly, we'll be starting with the biggest part of this release, which is the Home or appliance modelling aspects. This webinar is supplemented by a second technical webinar with a deep dive into Home, but in this session we'll introduce it, show you where it is, what it is, an overview of its benefits, how super quick and easy it is to set up and run Home in Hero, how it fits into the NCC in your work, and we'll also cover our DTS or elemental provision Home aspect. I'll then go through the other updates to the tool, our new site analysis feature, future climate files, our nifty little drawing stamper utility tool that we've added to save you a bit of time on the certification stamping side of things, the updates we've made to the summary view to assist in better client reporting as well as gathering the data for other third-party uses like BASICs. I'll discuss Hero Mac, which version 4 supports, which is great, as well as some material and library updates, some new drawing modes, and other minor updates. Version 4 is Hero's NatHERS accredited Home release. We've worked really hard on not just producing a great interface and integration of Home, or what we call appliances in Hero, but we've focused on making it really quick, powerful and effortless so that this NatHERS Home aspect is a viable and beneficial pathway for your jobs. Before I dive into the appliances section, let's do a quick check on the state of play of the Australian states and their requirements as of 18th of March 2024. So the Australian Building Codes Board, ABCB, introduced the NCC 2022 in that same year, and we've seen the states propose a variety of implementation dates for the energy efficiency aspects of that code in their respective jurisdictions. This handy little map, produced thanks to Anthony Ratton, shows the state of play across Australia. So firstly, we have New South Wales, who adopted the NCC 2022 in October 23 last year. New South Wales has its own BASIC scheme, obviously, so has not adopted the Home framework, which is a little unfortunate in my opinion. I think it would be fantastic if NatHERS assessors there could use the NatHERS Home as an alternative to BASIC's energy section, as it is a lot better on so many fronts and just integrated into the NatHERS workflow, which most of the time you're doing anyway for BASICs. Would get better nationwide consistency. But kudos to New South Wales and BASICs. They've obviously had a quasi Home energy scheme in place for many years that we're only starting to move to nationally. So New South Wales practitioners have already been using Hero version 3.1 to demonstrate the BASIC's thermal comfort requirements. This is a de facto 7-star rating, despite BASICs calling it a total energy load. These total energy loads are the same as the 7-star ratings, albeit there are a few BASICs edge cases and BASICs still has its own heating and cooling load limits. ACT has been on the full NCC 2022, including Home, since the start of 2024. There's been legislation there that unfortunately locked in old NatHERS tools historically in the ACT that created confusion of whether Hero could be applied there. But I'm really happy to finally report Hero is now fully ACT approved with some recent legislation changes, which is great for ACT folk and our users who operate in that area. This means that Hero is now nationwide accepted across all states and territories. So the next states are Queensland and Victoria, who will be adopting NCC 2022, including the 7-star and Home in May 2024. Queensland additionally has the MP 4.1 provisions, which do override some NCC aspects for Queensland jobs, some star rating credits for both Class 1 and Class 2, and Victoria has its own local council varieties in the SDAP and BESS, etc., as I'm sure most of you are aware. We then look forward to South Australia joining the party later this year on NCC 2022 and the Home in October 2024. Western Australia coming on board in May 2025 next year. Tasmania at this stage not adopting the energy efficiency components of the NCC 2022. That may change in 2025. And the NT have adopted a 5-star NatHERS pathway So we may see a bit more NatHERS up there where you can use 2019 or 2022 NatHERS profiles in the NT using Hero to achieve a compliance there. So a lovely integrated national approach to our national construction code, eh? So with the introduction of the NCC 2022, we saw new objectives around what I'll refer to broadly as whole of home. So addressing the wider energy usage of a home beyond the previous focus that was predominantly around the thermal fabric and heating and cooling energy balance in a home, though I suppose we've had some provisions on the hot water and lighting side to a certain degree, but not within NatHERS. So now for all new homes we work on, we'll be assessing, analysing and certifying the range of appliances that we might find in the home, such as HVAC, heating, cooling and air conditioning, hot water services, lighting, pool pumps, solar photovoltaic, PV and batteries, and we're also measuring cooking and plug load appliances to a certain degree. Personally, I think it's a great next step for the residential building industry in Australia. Whenever I've talked to the average layman about what we do here at Hero, invariably they'll say something like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I'm looking at getting solar on my home. How can Hero help me there?" And I have to say, "Oh, no, it doesn't do that." Or they'd say, "Oh, my old hot water service is about to kick the bucket. Can I use Hero to help me decide what to do next?" And I say, "No, it doesn't do that either. It's mostly just your thermal fabric, insulation, materials, shading, etc." So now we can say, yeah, absolutely, use Hero. It's a fantastic way to choose and compare appliances using NatHERS Whole of Home. So I think the introduction of appliances into the NatHERS framework is really positive. It brings with it some great new areas of discussion with our clients, builders, designers, and the final occupants. We now have a standardized methodology in NatHERS around predicting the overall expected household electricity, gas, or LPG or wood usage. We have now an expected running cost of the home overall and overall operational greenhouse emissions. These are metrics that are really useful and valuable to the wider industry to expand upon this previous focus of star ratings and megajoules in the thermal fabric side. In many areas of the country, as recent data has shown, the heating and cooling energy, while obviously important, can sometimes be even the minority of the overall energy usage, and so it's great that we're now focusing attention on the rest of the pie. You can also start to use this new NatHERS Whole of Home to start setting stretch targets of where we want to head to next. Goals like zero energy or net zero emissions or positive emissions or zero running cost homes, and we've supported that in our platform. So I'm very positive about it. There's room for improvement, of course, but I'm really excited that we have this whole new area of work in the tool that you guys can use for your projects and clients. So where's it all coming from in the code? Well, very briefly, for Class 1 detached housing in the Volume 2 of the NCC 2022, we have these updated objectives and functional statements in Part H6, Energy Efficiency, that are around reducing energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, and improving health and amenity. And then we have the performance requirements, H6P2, energy usage, where a benchmark is meant to be set. That is, we will use less than 70% of an equivalent home that has a 3-star ducted AC system and 5-star instant gas and 4 watts a square meter lighting. We then see in the deemed to satisfy provisions 2 options for complying with that performance requirement as usual, an energy rating approach or elemental provision approach. And so that whole of home requirement, energy requirement, H6P2, is satisfied by complying with Specification 42, Clause 3, using energy rating software, or Parts 13.6 and 0.7 for elemental, which I'll discuss later. So looking at that Specification 42, Clause 3, net equivalent energy usage, a building must achieve a whole of home rating of not less than 60 using house energy rating software. And also that Clause 4, Part 2, applies to whole of house still, with requirements for things like insulation of hot water piping, ductwork, maximum power density of lighting remains, and some pool control requirements. So that's for Volume 2. For Volume 1, for Class 2 apartments, this is basically the same, but with a minimum whole of home rating of 50 for any apartment, which I believe was set lower because it's harder to offset apartments with solar than you can for Class 1, of course. Okay, great. We've set the scene. That's what we need to do. How does Hero allow us to do this? Let's step into it. So Hola Home is what we call appliances in Hero. And so in the summary view, there's a new tab called Appliances. And at the top here, you can simply turn on Enable Appliances or Hola Home to get started. And hey presto, we've already got a bunch of appliances created for us. And you can use this top toolbar to navigate through each one. So we already have a default HVAC system for all of our zones, a hot water service, cooking, which is our cooktops and ovens, lighting, and we can add pools and pool pumps here. We have plug loads, which is the balance and remainder of our demand to cover things like fridges, washing machines, and TVs. And we can add solar PV and batteries as needed in this section. You'll already see that we have some Hola Home results here and in the bottom status bar. We have an energy value, running costs, and greenhouse emissions, alongside our star rating and heating and cooling loads and any thermal comfort rating. And that's the really cool thing about Hero Hola Home, is that it's just integrated really seamlessly and holistically with the rest of what you're doing in Hero, such as your thermal fabric aspects. You'll notice though that we don't have a Hola Home rating yet. And so if we head back up to the HVAC system, you'll notice there's an alert here regarding not having any thermal results for our HVAC. And that's because NatHERS Hola Home actually requires 2 new Chenath simulation runs that are different to our star rating thermal fabric simulation. And so all we need to do is just do another run. And so you hit run, and we now run all 3 or even 4 simulations in parallel. The star rating thermal fabric run, these 2 new Hola Home runs for the HVAC thermal loads, and if selected, any optional thermal comfort free running simulations. So it's really seamless. You can make any changes to your windows or floors. You just hit run. You simultaneously get updated star rating, simultaneous Hola Home rating, and you'll be saving a lot of time there rather than, say, doing your thermal fabric simulation, getting that to 7 stars, taking it into a Hola Home tool or module, running those 2 Hola Home simulations, doing your Hola Home assessment and model, calculating your Hola Home result, and then you make a thermal fabric change and you have to start that whole process again and do the star rating, Hola Home upload, and then back to Hola Home simulations again. So we've worked hard to make sure that that's not the case for Hero users. So I hope you get the picture. It's going to save you a lot of time. You do it side by side. You don't have to do any restart and do the process again if the client changes a window or something. And so that's, again, one of the big positives of Hero Hola Home. All right, our simulations are done. They ran in parallel, so all 4 of those simulations took the same time as one simulation, so no additional time there. And you may have noticed we have a Hola Home rating down the bottom of 32. So not what we need, we need 60. And we also have our energy, running cost, and emissions values were updated too at the end of that simulation, as we have the HVAC loads now being added into that. And so that's another thing that you'll notice, is we've actually got the Hola Home calculation down so quick, you basically don't need to hit any kind of calculate button for Hola Home. It's on automatic by default, and it's just always done at the end of a simulation or whenever you change a appliance type, such as the air conditioning type or even star ratings, any type of property. It takes about half a second or less, and you get your Hola Home results updated on the fly. So again, really nice and seamless. It's great to be able to just click through alternatives and get the impacts updated live to really dial it in. I'll be going through this in more detail in the Wednesday Part 2 webinar, but I'm now just going to go over all the rest of the aspects of appliances quickly now too. So I'll touch on some interesting settings and flexibility of appliances in Hero that may appeal to folks who are in states that maybe aren't even touching Whole Home yet. So Tassie or WA or NT or New South Wales. There's really nothing stopping you from using appliances in Hero. You don't need to be pursuing NatHERS Whole Home compliance to use it. And we really recommend, even if you don't need that Whole Home certificate, say New South Wales assessments or WA, as I said, why not provide a whole home assessment alongside your star rating anyway? You can just turn off generate whole home certificate, and then when you upload this project to the Hero web portal, it'll just be a thermal fabric 7-star certificate or whatever, and with no whole home component. And you can do this for NatHERS 2019 jobs or 2022. So why not? It's a great value add. There's nothing stopping you from using all of these great analytics that we can get out of whole home to help your clients. So the whole home approach is pretty easy. You enter in your system types and their performance levels. You'll be getting these instant result updates. In each category of appliance, you'll see the individual results. And we've also added this cool comment section for the first time in Hero. It's pretty novel. It allows you to put in, say, recommendations or comments and notes and convey things to a team or your client when you export this report. Down the bottom of the view, you'll get your overall whole home results. You can see a category by category breakdown of your results. You'll also get a fuel breakdown of your results, grid electricity or solar or battery or gas. And you'll also get a monthly breakdown of your results for energy, running cost, and emissions. And if you had a multi-dwelling project, you'll also get a dwelling by dwelling breakdown shown here too. As you may have noticed on this one, where your project has a 0 or negative energy, running cost, or emissions value, you'll also see in the results summary and in your reports too these little badges of 0 energy, 0 cost, 0 emissions, and that's just to recognize going above and beyond the minimum accomplishment for your client. You can see in the top toolbar, you can even load in templates of predetermined systems using the template button up here. You can even put the view into a new presentation mode that we've added for the first time into Hero version 4 that removes editing capabilities and collapses and simplifies the view for client reporting and export. And you can export to PDF, images, clipboard, and CSV. We've also added into the hourly results viewer the appliances results, which is really cool. And so you can see a breakdown of your whole home loads throughout the year, side by side with your temperature and heating and cooling loads, or just on their own. And you'll see this top and bottom variety where the demand categories are on the top and the supply fuel categories are on the bottom, which is really cool, as you can see, like batteries charging up by solar during the day, excess solar being exported, and the battery depleting later on until the grid kicks in, and lots of way to really nerd out in that area. Okay, I'll have to leave it there for this one, because we do have this NatHERS hosted technical webinar that all the NatHERS tools are doing. So we decided to split this Hero version 4 release webinar into 2 parts. I'll end this overview of our whole home component there, and on Wednesday I'm going to come back here and we'll really dive into each category of appliance and describe all of the various types of appliances, so you'll be fully ready to do a whole home rating, and you'll know about STCs for solar hot water types and the different star rating types for air conditioners and the different battery types, etc. So I hope you join me for that. As I discussed earlier, there are 2 deemed to satisfy methods of compliance for these new whole home energy usage aspects of NCC 2022. Obviously, one is NatHERS, which is, in our opinion, a much more beneficial pathway for the vast majority of jobs. But there is also what we call DTS, but which is more accurately called Elemental Provisions DTS, as a compliance pathway. And for the first time in Hero, we've integrated that Elemental Provision compliance pathway for Whole Home. So you can use this to demonstrate Whole Home compliance as an alternative to a NatHERS Whole Home rating. So you could say submit a 7-star NatHERS thermal fabric only certificate on the Hero web portal and then comply with the Whole Home energy usage components using the elemental provisions. So this is clause H6D2 part 2B in the code, noting it's only for buildings with a total floor area of less than 500 square meters, and it relates to a compliance method for appliances that's based on efficiency factors, tables and formulas outlined in part 13.6 of the housing provisions. And the ABCB provide a Whole Home calculator that also implements these formulas that you can use to comply, though that's not strictly required. And in this calculator, you enter in your project details and appliances, and you get a simple allowance or maximum score, and then your actual energy score, and then a simple tick or cross to indicate compliance. So as mentioned, we've implemented these calculations in Hero, and you can simply start to use a DTS compliance pathway for Whole Home by simply checking this Whole Home DTS calculation setting here. You then enter in your appliances as usual, and you'll start noticing this DTS icon in the status bar results summary, where if you hover it, you'll see your current DTS score and the required score, as well as in the Whole Home results summary section, where you'll again see that actual score and allowance, and either a tick or a cross to indicate compliance, or a not available, which would indicate that you can't comply with DTS with your current setup. So Whole Home DTS does have quite a few limitations, not just on that maximum floor area aspect, but in the granularity, in that everything's got quite wide performance bands in terms of star ratings, or lumping all heat pumps or all solar hot water systems as one option on the calculator, which does restrict flexibility. But there's also some systems and even star ratings for systems that just aren't supported in DTS, such as instantaneous electric hot water systems, for example. So in this instance, we show NA or not available to indicate those, and you'll likely need to go a NatHERS pathway. If you're happy with your Whole Home DTS score, you can then really easily spit out from Hero a pre-populated ABCB Whole House calculator spreadsheet from the results section here, with a drop-down available for multi-dwelling projects. And you're now ready to go to submit this Excel spreadsheet alongside your NatHERS thermal rating certificate, if you so choose. Most of the time, I think you'll find that NatHERS is a better option, but it's good to be able to see side by side with your NatHERS rating in Hero this DTS aspect for full flexibility for you and your clients. Another of the new features we've added to Hero version 4 is this new Site tab in the summary view. So it's a first integration of giving you some tools to better understand the climates that you're building, designing, and analysing that perhaps aren't always obvious, but are obviously a really important foundation to understand prior to beginning any sustainable design discussions. So it's relatively simple. You now go to the Site tab where you can select your climate zone, and then the weather file year. There's the NatHERS 2019 weather files and the recently updated 2022 weather files, as well as those 20, 30, 50, 70, 90 future climate files that I discussed earlier. So you get a bit of an analysis of the outdoor temperatures, solar radiation, and cloud cover of the site on a month-by-month basis. You can, as usual, export these to various formats, images, or use in reports. It's actually a good way to just export the weather files into a readable format, as the raw weather files are almost impossible to understand in their raw format. But the site view is a good place to start to inform your clients, designers, builders, or even yourselves, if you're operating in a climate zone you're not familiar with, of the local conditions, the minimums, the maximums, whether it's a super cloudy site where you might not be able to rely on things like solar passive heating during the winter, or how solar PV might even be affected during the year. For example, one of the ones that I found quite interesting, is the Darwin weather file, where the solar PV or solar irradiance in a traditional Australian winter is actually higher than in the wet monsoon traditional summer period, which is understandable but very interesting. And it's important that we consider our local climates, so we are designing appropriate design measures and not just relying on one-size-fits-all solutions. Hero version 4 also supports the ability to change the default weather file when in non-regulatory mode. So when you're in non-regulatory mode, you can now select this weather file, which will just show default when you're in regulatory mode, and you can choose an alternative weather file for your project. One use case of changing the weather file might be that you just actually want to run an alternative weather file than the one that NatHERS kind of restricts you to, something that may be more appropriate for your microclimate, so you can explore that. But one of the areas where this feature is most useful is that it allows you to integrate CSIRO's future predictive weather files that CSIRO produced last year. So you have to download those files, and to get those, you go to the CSIRO's data shop. You download a big zip file of about 100 meg and you drop it into your Hero user folder, where your Hero library climate subfolder, and you can unzip this predictive weather file dataset from CSIRO into that folder. You'll see the 83 NatHERS climate zones, the 69 official ones and the 14 that never made it in. And within each climate file, you'll see a 2030, 2050, 2070, 2090 future climate file for 3 different scenarios, and they are this RCP 2.6, which is where atmospheric emissions peaked in 2020 and then declined rapidly. I think we might have missed that boat. And then RCP 4.5, where emissions peak in 2040, and RCP 8.5, where it's a little bit more like business as usual. So I expect we'll be wanting to analyze using these 2 conditions. So when you change these, the weather file, they'll be incorporated into your standard runs, whole house runs, star rating runs, and the free running thermal comfort runs are also quite useful to analyze for this, and they'll just be used as per a normal simulation. And we can start to use these future files to engage with climate resilient design analysis, how these homes are going to perform in a warming climate over the next 50 or 100 years that they exist. How does the heating and cooling balance change over the years? What measures can we do today to ensure that we don't build an obsolete built environment that in 20 years requires significant retrofitting to stay comfortable and minimize energy in a warming climate? Like so many variables in Hero, you can run these as optimization batch scenarios using the optimize feature. So you can set this up as a project variable, future climate, and load whatever batch scenarios you'd like to run and begin that optimization parallel batches if you have the files in those folders that I just mentioned. So the future climate files are an interesting aspect that I think we could be engaging with for some of our clients. I hope it's useful for research projects and those types of things. So I encourage you to explore that functionality and give it a go. The next new feature we've added into Hero version 4 is this handy little drawing stamper tool. So it's a utility tool that's designed to make it super quick and easy to create your stamped NatHERS energy rating drawing sets. So putting your NatHERS stamp over your architectural drawings and specifications. The stamp view is here on the main toolbar of Hero, and inside that pop-up you have a setup section on the left and a preview section on the right where the drawings and the stamp PDF is shown. So you simply select your stamp file here from your hard drive that you've downloaded from the Hero web portal, select your architectural files that you'd like to stamp over, and select an output directory here where your final file will be placed, as well as a file name. You'll then see the drawings and the stamp preview in this area, and you can move through the pages down here at the bottom of the screen. You can resize the stamp using this little slider or type it in, and you can set a preferred position of your stamp across a variety of grid positions throughout the page, as well as adding a X and Y margin fitted off the edge of the page better. You can rotate the stamp if required to align with any PDFs that are also rotated. Reset button will bring everything back to its original position. You can also just simply drag the stamp around using the mouse to its desired location. And if we see here, it's only dragged that first page. I can turn on this setting, move all on mouse drag, and now when I drag it around, all of the pages will follow that drag. There's then this handy little button called Fit to White Space, and what that does is there's always going to be some overlaps of a stamp position where there might be PDF information underneath that we want to avoid overlapping over. And so we detect the PDF data stream and we shift it away based on its preferred position. When you click this Fit to White Space button, and it'll do a quick little calculation and shift all of the stamps across the page into its appropriate white space. There's a few scenarios where this may not work when the PDF is like a flat vectorized image, but a lot of the time it's a great way of just quickly shifting all of the stamps away from any overlapping information. Down in the bottom of the page where the page numbers are, we also have a delete page option. So let's say you have a 60-page PDF where 20 of the pages are cabinetry and joinery drawings. You can just select the page and click delete page. And now that page won't be included in the final stamp drawing set. And finally, you click the Save to PDF button and you'll complete the process and create the stamp drawing file. It's pretty much the same size as the input drawing file, so you don't have to worry about that. And then it'll automatically open in your PDF viewer if you have this setting checked. So let's run through a simple example and show you how quick and easy it is. So on this one, I think the size could probably be a bit smaller. Let's put it in an appropriate position. Perhaps we want to change the Y margin to fit it nice and snug up into that top right corner border. And then there are likely going to be some positions where it will overlap, like in this page. And so we generally want to click this Fit to White Space button and just do the automatic shift calculation like it's done there. And then we can click Save to PDF and bring it over into our system viewer. And you'll see we've stamped this PDF in the right location without any overlaps. We hope you enjoyed that little tool. Hopefully it frees you up to do more sustainable design analysis and not administration, which is what we're all about. In Hero version 4, we've also added even more power into our already quite customizable and dynamic summary view with a focus on client communications and data export formats like the new BASIC's material data export requirements. So in the summary view, there's this new filter button where you can turn on and off the visibility of your columns like previously. You'll notice, however, there's a few new columns: dwelling, level, zone, zone type, and condition, which are very useful headers to put in front of each row for that type of client communicative purpose. I think it's easy if I show you some of these features using some examples. So let's say we have an external wall set up like this, where we have some brick veneer walls on the ground floor with insulation, some fiber cement lightweight walls on the top floor with insulation, and some uninsulated walls in the garage. Previously, it's been hard to communicate where these walls are in relation to trying to communicate that to a builder or a client. And so these new columns are obviously very handy at doing that. And so we might want to turn on the zone column here. And what you'll see is that Hero shows many values here in the zone column. So we have all of the zones that have this insulation, all of the zones that have this fiber cement, and then it's clear that it's just the garage that has no insulation. So it's hard for the builder to be confused by that. You can turn on the separate by value column. This is how the summary views traditionally operated. Turn that on and you will get a zone by zone breakdown of where these walls are, which may be useful as well. And again, we're seeing that it is just the garage that's uninsulated here. Let's do another quick example to show what I mean. Let's say, again, we have two window specifications, a single glazed specification for our unconditioned zones like garages and laundries, and a double glazed specification for our conditioned zones. Again, traditionally, it's been difficult to communicate where those are to your client. Now with these new columns, we might want to turn on zone, and it's evidently clear that it's just these four zones where the single glazing is and where the double glazing is. Again, if I turned on separate by value, these multi-value cells would become row by row cells, like the summary view has traditionally operated. Let's take another example that's perhaps a multi-dwelling project. It's a BASIX project. With the new materials data entry requirements of BASIX, we need a breakdown of the floor areas per adjacency per dwelling. And we haven't had that previously in Hero, this way of breaking out the summary view on a per dwelling basis. So with these new things, you can turn on dwelling visible. You'd see the multiple values of dwellings in this internal floor row. But for BASIX, we need it on a per dwelling basis. So we'd be turning on, in this case, separate by value. And all of the 25 apartments in this job, we can now export that to our clipboard or CSV or whatever. And we now have all of the areas per dwelling that are required for BASIX. Also, it's worth adding that these columns and configuration settings are saved into the project file so that when you load the project back, it loads exactly where that project last was at, so you don't need to set it up again. And you can also even save the current view settings of the summary view to a template file and say, this is my new test file, or share that file with your staff or team, or use it on future projects. Lastly, there's quite a few new columns in each of these tables, so it may be worth reviewing each of those of what data is available now in the summary view. A few new features like this handy fit to column width button. So hopefully this assists your projects, particularly on that communications side, data Xbox side. So we hope you find these updates useful. Alongside Hero version 4's Windows release, we're happy to announce that we have again brought Mac up to speed, and Hero version 4 is fully Mac supported for Home. Mac users may be aware version 3.1 did not get a Mac release cycle, so Mac users have been using version 3, so we're happy to bring that up to the latest version for our Mac users. I'd highlight we are the only native Mac NatHERS software tool on the market. It's based on our unique cloud simulation capabilities, given that the Chenath engine can't be run on your Mac. So again, as usual, we have our two Mac installers for version 4, Mac Intel and Mac Silicon for M1 and M2 machines, available on our website for download and install. It's a big benefit to use a native Mac application on your machine rather than running a parallel virtual machine for Windows, which usually knocks out half your resources and limits graphics capabilities and these kind of things. So if you are a Mac user, please give it a go. Hero Mac version 4's only limitation at the moment is that the optimized batch simulation capabilities aren't supported yet, but otherwise it mirrors the Windows release entirely. Every time you hit run, you'll be able to run a thermal fabric, your two Home simulations, and your free running thermal comfort mode if selected on our cloud servers, and then do everything else that Windows users can. Once you've done the simulation, everything is really fast. The House calculations are instantaneous, just like the Windows version. They don't need to be run on the cloud. It's just the simulations that underpin the Home. So very happy that we were able to squeeze that into version 4 for our Mac users for this Home release. I'll cover now a bunch of minor updates quickly for version 4. So Hero version 4 now integrates Chenath version 3.23 engine from CSIRO. Really, there's only one thing that's changed with that release for Hero users, and that's that Chenath now reports back to us the air tightness or infiltration rate, even for regulatory mode simulations. So we now get this actual air changes per hour at 50 PA and at natural pressure that the regulatory mode simulation used for your project on every job now, which is great. Hero's had air tightness variability in the tool since version 3, where you can switch out to non-regulatory mode and enter in a different air tightness rate based on some blower door test target that you're wanting to achieve, which is still very important. And I'd note that you can likewise run various air tightness scenarios using the optimized batch feature. But the main thing for version 3.23 is that this is now reported for regulatory runs. So Chenath not reported this to us before because Chenath doesn't use a fixed air tightness rate like some energy calculations. It's an hourly zone by zone infiltration rate which is dependent on the hourly wind speed, wind direction, side exposure. So actually, in many respects, more accurate than fixed air leakage calculations for all the NatHERS haters out there, because there's not really a single building out there that operates at a fixed 5 air changes per hour leakage every hour of the year. This new value is great in that we now have a benchmark for each project, and that value is what we've generally heard on the grapevine, that NatHERS regulatory mode simulations range typically from around 8 air changes to 12 air changes per hour at 50 PA. So NatHERS uses quite leaky air tightness rates. It at least gives us, though, this benchmark point that we can now analyze for your project what the benefits of going from 8 to 7 to 5 to 3 to 1, etc. will provide for your project. So it's another step in the right direction on this front, and hopefully sets us up for further air tightness integration into the NatHERS framework, which I think should be a strong priority, given that it isn't great that we're designing buildings using inaccurate air leakage values of 8 to 12 in terms of heating and cooling balances, etc., when, for example, a precast apartment unit is unlikely to be that leaky. And as I've always said, it's a bit crazy spending $30,000 extra on thermally broken window frames and still not recognizing a couple of $1,000 or $100 on simple air tightness works and a blower door test or even a ventilation system at a fraction of that kind of cost, which seems a bit odd. We have some new materials in the NatHERS material library. Some new light earth style materials, lighter rammed earth, lighter mud brick cob, which is cool. I've shown them here with the red of the previous options and the green showing these new options. I'm a big fan of the natural building community and their objectives, and these materials are new scientifically tested mixes of mud brick, rammed earth and cob that usually contain a bit more straw, lightweight additives to improve the insulative balance of these materials rather than them being quite predominantly thermal mass heavy materials. So this will definitely help natural builders achieve higher R values while still building these lovely low embodied natural products that they and I love. We've added 2 custom floor assemblies to the floor assembly library for a new product that we've been requested by a few of you guys to consider. It's an interesting concrete subfloor panel that replaces particle board subfloor called XM Alpha Panel. So there's 2 variants of that floor assembly in the library. I'd recommend you try that out. I think many of you will find it a particularly useful card up your sleeve for adding a bit of thermal mass to, say, lightweight 2-story buildings. So check it out. We have added some new drawing modes to the visual view. Firstly, you're now able to copy and paste all items across the project rather than previously it was just zones, dwellings and the whole project. So windows, doors, skylights and holes, etc. can all be copied and pasted across zones onto other walls or other dwellings as needed, which I'm sure will save you a lot of time when that workflow is required. We've also added a merge zone functionality to the merge or join drawing mode. Rather than just being able to join walls, floors and ceilings, you can now select 2 zones and hit the join hotkey or the merge button and we'll bring them together into a single zone. Split zone is obviously next on the agenda, but I think these issues will help for reworking floor plans as a feature, which is something we're really wanting to focus on the next release cycle. As usual, we've resolved a bunch of other minor items and bug fixes, so if you're so inclined, pop over to the changelog on the menu and find out all about those minor items. Lastly, as you'll notice, we're continually improving the workflow and design of Hero. So the visual design and user experience has had some updates, some new color schemes, fonts, styles, user profile images, these kinds of things have changed. That process is ongoing. We have some redesigns in place that we'll be rolling out over this year that continue to improve the workflow of doing projects in Hero, making it easier to understand, more functional and efficient.